Welcome everybody to the St. Charles Bowling Lanes right here in St. Charles, Missouri for today's program, The Science Behind Bowling. Let's bring Phil Vida in right now. Phil, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Very glad you're here. Well, first, let's talk just a little bit about the Lindenwood University bowling team. How large is it? What do they do? Do you compete nationally? What happens?
We do compete nationally. On paper, we have a program that has about 100 members. Our governing body, the governing body of collegiate bowling, allows us to actually travel with up to 25 guys and 25 girls. We travel pretty much all over the Midwest, and then when we get to the postseason, which is the time of year that we're in now, we could go anywhere in the country to compete for regional championships, and then hopefully we make it to the national championship tournament, which is in April.
Well, and you've done that before, because I see banners here that you're former national champions.
We have done that. We've done well in the past. Our men won our first national championship in 2005, and then the women did it the very next year in 2006. We've come very close several other times, been in the national TV finals a couple times, but just haven't managed to get another championship, but we've been knocking on the door.
Now, does a college bowling meet, so to speak, work like a basketball tournament does, or is it like one-on-one like a football game? How does it operate?
Because of the amount of travel that's involved in getting to a particular location, most collegiate bowling events are not head-to-head. At least in our division, they aren't. Most of the collegiate tournaments basically are tournament style, where you have all teams showing up and they bowl kind of like a league style, where it might be 5 or 6 team or league style games on Saturday. And then we also bowl a format called Baker, which is where 5 players combine to bowl one 10-frame game. The first player bowls the first and the 6th frame, the second player bowls the 2nd and 7th, and so on. So you have 5 people bowling just one 10-frame game. And that's how our national championship is decided. So that's the true team bowling in collegiate bowling.
That's very cool. I never knew that. That's great. That is team bowling for sure. You're going to get to see some more examples of the Lindenwood University's bowling prowess throughout today's program. We're looking forward to showing you that. But we want to start with just a little bit of conversation about the equipment of bowling, so to speak, and related to some important scientific concepts you're probably already familiar with. Let's talk a little bit about the bowling ball. We see the bowling ball we've got here, and you notice that there's the nice finger holes. And of course, this bowling ball that I'm holding is 14 pounds. And one of the terms you're probably familiar with from all your study in science classes, the term known as mass. The mass of the bowling ball on Earth, at least, refers to its weight, because obviously we're not dealing with a different gravitational field. Weight changes, like on Jupiter. The mass would still be the same, but the weight would be different because Jupiter has much more gravity, and on the moon, the weight would be much lighter because the moon has less gravity. Let's talk, though, about the nature of this ball. What's it made of? And how do the finger holes get set and all that kind of good stuff?
Okay, well this is a house ball. So this is one that's just provided at a bowling center. So when people come in, if they don't have their own equipment, they can try to find something that they can hold on to and fits somewhat close, so they can bowl without their own equipment. Because of that, it's kind of a generic drilling. So the finger holes are probably bigger than they need to be for most people. The thumb hole is probably a little bit bigger than it needs to be for most people. If somebody's going to take up the sport of bowling seriously, the first thing we always recommend as a coach is get your own bowling ball and have it drilled to fit your hand, because everybody's hand's a little bit different. So, much like shoes, if you go around with 4 sizes too big, you're not going to walk as well as you would if the shoes fit.
Well, speaking of shoes, actually, let's just talk about this right now since you mentioned we got an email question that came in. Don't forget, it's live at hectv.org where you can email, that actually ask about bowling shoes, and I'll put my shoe up here so everybody can see how fancy schmancy it looks when you go to St. Charles Lanes and you get to see the bowling shoe that everybody uses. But they wanted to know specifically about the bowling shoe. It's besides the fact that obviously we don't want to scuff up the lanes as we're walking, is there a reason they're made the way they are, that the surface on the bottom is so smooth?
Well, generally what you want to do when you have that momentum of your approach to the foul line, you're coming to a stop and the bowling ball keeps going. Well, you want to do that as smoothly as possible, and if you don't slide at all, then that tends to be a little bit more inconsistent and a little bit harder on the joints, to be honest with you. So bowling shoes are designed to have a little bit of slide to them, especially on the foot that would normally slide. Now these are generic bowling shoes, so they're not equipped as well.
Well, so we've got a ball, we've got shoes. Let's do a little demonstration so people can just see what it's like. I'm not necessarily going to be very successful at it, but we'll see what happens.
Here, let me hold your notes.
Thank you, kind sir. So when I want to get, and I guess I need to hit the reset button, which we just did. So I'm going to begin my approach, and I notice that the lane has certain triangles that I see out there, arrows that I see out there. As people think about the bowling alley lane and as they begin to think about where they want the ball to go, those arrows should matter to them?
Well, it's kind of like if you're trying to make a free throw in basketball, you're not looking off at the stands. You're trying to look at somewhere where you want to try to throw the ball in order to be accurate in making your free throw. Bowling's the same way. The pins are 60 feet away, and it's a lot harder to hit something 60 feet away than it is to hit something that's closer, which the arrows are about 16 feet away. Okay. So that gives you a targeting area that you can look at a little closer to help you get the ball where you want it down further down the lane.
Krista, I'm going to do my best. We'll see what this ends up like. And I would say that was a very nice example of it going straight down to the right-hand side. Now, we see a little bit of pin action there. Let's begin to talk about another important concept, gravity. Mm-hmm. Because obviously there's gravity that's at work on the lane as the ball goes down. There's the center of gravity that's in the ball. Let's talk about the nature of the ball then, because there's like a weight inside it, right?
Yeah, well, didn't notice this is just half a ball.
How convenient. Thank you so much.
So basically the surface of this bowling ball is a composite material that's very porous, and it's designed to kind of be like a snow tire. It's designed with a lot of friction properties on the surface so that it tries to grab the lane. Even with the oil that's on the lane, it tries to grab the lane better. What's inside is a core that's made of a lot of other different components designed to create a little bit of instability and a little bit of imbalance in the bowling ball. These are like different materials, but this entire piece right here is what would be considered the core of the bowling ball.
Okay, and why do I want this little bit of instability?
Basically, when the ball is let go, when you roll the ball down the lane, this instability creates the ball trying to find its equilibrium. Oh. And when it's trying to find its equilibrium, it does what's called flaring. And that makes the ball rotate to a different surface every time it rotates. Now what that does is that the fresh surface of the bowling ball then is in contact with the lane the whole time. The bowling balls of 25, 30 years ago, they would roll over one spot. So as soon as it rotated once, it would already have oil right in that spot, and then it would roll over that same oil track the whole way down the lane. Thus, it didn't hook as much.
And we want it to hook, which is something we're going to talk about a little bit later. Very good. So there's some good basic information about the ball itself. Now you mentioned that pattern we see on the lanes, and obviously the lanes have oil on them.
Correct.
And so let's talk a little bit about that. And Krista, I'll ask you if you could you bring us the water bottle and the other little bottle that's over there, so as we talk about the...
We'll focus on this one first.
Okay, so I've got a water bottle here which is 16.9 fluid ounces, that's 500 milliliters for us to carry, to do the conversion there. Thankfully, the label actually tells me that. And we want to ask you guys a question as you're out there watching. Looking at this bottle, do you think the oil that gets poured on the lane...
On one lane.
Is this amount of water? Do you think it's more than this amount of water? Do you think it's only part of this amount of water? We've got a great video that we can show you of the machinery that they use to actually oil the alley. And we'll do this now as we talk a little bit about the amount of oil that goes on the lane. So let us know, Phil, what's the nature of the oil and why do we oil to start with? It's
a pretty high quality oil. It's very thin. You know, it's basically a lot thinner than what most people would be familiar with, which is motor oil, I guess. So that is laid over the surface of the lane in a very thin manner by the oil machine, which is we just saw the demonstration of.
Very cool. So the oil is going to matter. You're going to use that oil, obviously, because friction is going to be very important to you. So friction, another important vocabulary term that we're aware of. Friction, the resistance between objects as one rolls over the other. Obviously, the ball is rolling over the bowling alley lane. So does the oil help reduce friction, or does it increase friction of the ball?
It increases, or it reduces the friction of the ball. So and most of the oil, a typical oil pattern, most of the oil is going to be on the first part of the lane. An average length of the oil pattern is about 40 feet. The lane is about 60 feet from the foul line until it gets to the pin. So the last 20 feet are usually dry. So the oil allows the ball to skid through that first 30 to 40 feet, and then the dynamics of the bowling ball are trying to operate and trying to create that ball to create some rotation where it reads the friction on the back end of the lane and then gets into a roll right before it hits the pins.
Well, now how much oil actually gets on the lane then?
Okay, well if you guessed this amount, that's too much. If you guessed half of this, that's too much. Actually, the amount of oil that's placed on a lane on average is 6% of this water bottle.
And you're telling me that I should actually see that oil on my ball once I roll it the first time through?
If you're throwing the right kind of ball, you will see it. Now, the one that you were throwing, it's hard to see because it's plastic.
But we might be able to see it on Krista's ball?
Might be able to see it on Krista's
Well, then
ball.
we'll invite Krista to come back in again, and we'll do this demonstration. Krista will move out so we're not in the middle of your demonstration. And when she's going to pick up my spare. I appreciate this, Krista. Thank you for picking up my spare. Oh, yes! That is what I'm talking about, Krista Elmore. That is very impressive. I like that a lot. And we'll get the ball right now as it comes back to us, because if life is good, we're actually going to see some oil
Correct.
streaks on the ball.
Correct.
We'll bring it out here into the light.
There we go.
Oh, you can definitely see it.
Now, I talked about how porous the material was.
Uh-huh.
If we watched this, it would disappear right before our eyes. Because the ball would actually soak up the oil.
So another time I throw the ball, depending upon how I release it and how the spin works, it might actually, those streaks of oil I'm seeing here might actually be in a different place on the ball?
Generally, the way somebody lets the ball go every time, they're trying to be consistent with that, and those tracks will be pretty much in the exact same spot every time.
So then if I'm actually interested in becoming a good bowler like you and Krista, then this actually gives me a chance to, like, this would be something for me to look at visually to say, am I releasing the ball the same way all the time?
Exactly.
Oh, little did I know.
Yeah.
Okay, we know you guys are going to have email questions to send to us. Don't forget, it's live at hectv.org. But before we go to a question, Krista, bring over that bowling pin for us, and let's talk bowling pin.
I forgot to talk about this.
And Krista, while we've got you here, give the students a little bit of idea about you, because obviously you're a member of the Lindenwood bowling team. Have you been bowling forever?
I've been bowling since I was 3.
Oh my gosh, so you grew up in a family of bowlers?
I did.
And
my dad bowls, my mom bowls, we all bowl.
And so, how did you get to Lindenwood to bowl?
Some other people from back home, I'm from Washington State, they came and bowled here before me, and I just heard great things about the program from them, so I decided to come to Lindenwood.
Oh, very good. And I'm assuming, Phil, I won't put you on the spot too much, I'm assuming you're glad she did?
Of course.
Excellent answer. Thanks, Krista. Let's talk a little bit about the pin, which is, of course, another important part of the bowling experience. And as we talk about the pin, we mentioned gravity. Let's also add to the conversation the term center of gravity as we talk about what this pin is. Because the center of gravity of the pin is right about here where it's being hit all the time, basically?
Yeah, it's probably right about in here, maybe a little bit below where it's being hit.
Okay. And the pin is made of what? Is it like plastic material?
The inside of it's wood.
Okay.
So it's made out of a hardwood. You can actually see that it's wood.
Oh, you can see wood right there.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's wood that's covered in plastic. And then there's a hole that's hollowed out. The fact that it's a little hollow on the inside actually makes these pins bouncier. It gives them more action, more energy when they hit each other.
Right, so the shape and their weight obviously is going to affect all of that when the pin action occurs.
Correct. Yeah, they're designed in a way so that they fall over when they tip to a certain...
And so actually the bowling ball has kind of a low center of gravity because that's exactly how I want it to act. I want it, when the ball hits there, that's what I want it to do, is actually tip over.
Right. The pins are designed in such a way that the ball hits them so that they don't fly straight up in the air or they don't just get completely run over. You know, they kind of are going off sideways or straight back into each other as opposed to missing each other.
Krista, would you mind giving us another example?
Sure.
What I want us to look at this time is the action of the pins now. As Krista begins to set up, think about noticing just the pins and how they're reacting when the ball gets hit. We'll move out of the way, Krista, and let you go for the gusto.
The dreaded 10 pin.
Oh, the dreaded 10 pin left at the end there, Krista. And I'm actually gonna, we'll bring you back into the conversation because I'm gonna do a little bit of analysis. Come right over here. Do a little bit of analysis. What did you like about the motion of that you just did, and what did you not like so much?
Well, I like that I stayed down on my shot. That's really important to me, to be consistent on my shot. I hit the place on the lane that I wanted to. I just didn't get the carry that I was hoping for, but on taking my next shot, I could adjust for that by possibly like moving up or back just a little bit on the approach, or maybe moving a half board left or right.
And as we'll talk about, the approach is going to matter as well. Now, picking up this spare, the 10 pin, you're naturally doing a ball that's going to hook to the left since you're right-handed. So does that make this pin kind of hard to pick up, or are you going to actually change the way you release the ball to make it easier for you to get this pin?
I'm going to switch balls to a spare ball, which is made out of plastic, and just go right across the lane at it.
Well, let's see what happens.
Okay.
And Phil, as she does that, as she sets up, is she switching to a plastic ball because it's actually going to operate differently on the lane?
Correct. It's got a very smooth surface. Plastic is a slicker surface than the type of surface that I was explaining on the bowling ball earlier. So it's not going to grip the lane as well. It's not going to hook as much even if she rotates it a little bit. It's going to go pretty straight.
So in terms of the physics stuff we're talking about, it's actually more likely to go straight.
Exactly. So that she doesn't have to worry as much about the oil pattern or the friction on the lane. She just is going to try to roll it straight at the pin.
Go for it, Krista. Let's see what happens as she rolls it straight at the pin.
Oh!
I think it would have gotten it.
We've gotten some other email questions that have come in, Phil. Are the balls waxed at all? Is there any kind of like waxing or scrubbing that you do on the ball?
Well, one of the ways that we can make a bowling ball react differently is by changing the surface a little bit.
Okay.
A bowling ball comes to us when it's brand new with a certain surface on it. We can actually put polish on the ball and make that surface a little slicker so that it doesn't hook as much, or it wants to go down the lane further before it does. If we want the ball to try to read the lane earlier, we can sand it, put a little bit more surface on it.
And all of that's going to affect the friction that occurs between it and the lane then?
Correct.
That will affect the way
Correct.
it moves down the
lane.
lane.
The surface of a bowling ball is probably about 70% of the ball's reaction.
Oh, wow.
How it's drilled and everything else, where you put the finger and thumb holes, that accounts for the other 30%. But most of the bowling balls, 70% of it, if it's a shiny, slick ball, it's not going to hook early. It's going to try to go down the lane and hook later.
Wow.
If it's a dull surface, it's going to try to roll early. It may hook just as much, but it may be more of a smooth reaction as opposed to
Little did I know that there was
snap.
all that much involved. That is very, very cool. Little did I know that there was all that much stuff involved. We're going to keep talking about the ball, though, because we want to talk about the speed of the ball and we want to talk about the spin of the ball, the rotation of the ball. So we had the opportunity to come out before the program and do some video with Lindenwood University bowlers. So we want to bring up some bowling now that shows you the speed of the ball. And I want you just to pay attention to these different releases that are occurring and just notice how fast the ball is going down the lane, how much time it takes, and how the ball is reacting. Oh, stop being so good. That ball is actually moving down the lane pretty fast, and a little bit later in the program we're going to do an equation with you where you can look at the speed of the ball and figure out how many miles per hour it's actually going. But let's talk about what we saw there in terms of how the ball moves along the lane. One of the important terms that you might remember from high school physics class is the idea of momentum. We're going to bring that definition up for you. Because obviously what the bowler is trying to do is create momentum as a result of the pendulum motion that the bowler is using when he's actually going to release the ball, create the momentum that's going to send the ball down the lane, obviously. And as you think about that, and as we talk about the approach then, and making sure all that works, for me to create the best momentum possible, I've got to really time this out, right?
Yeah, it helps to have good timing. Basically, your steps towards the foul line and your swing have to be in sync with one another.
Okay. So let's take a moment to do me a little coaching.
Sure.
Can we do a little coaching?
Sure.
I'll give you my phone so
I get
the
all
email
the-
questions that they come in we can refer to. So like, I'm obviously wanting to create a pendulum swing here that's going to enable me to just release the ball as smoothly as possible.
Correct. You don't
But
want to force the swing. You just want to let gravity and that momentum, kind of like a grandfather clock with the pendulum going back and forth. You just want that to swing back and forth, and you want your steps to be in sync with that arm swing.
And
so generally the best way to do that is to make sure that on a regular 4-step delivery that the ball gets pushed out at the same time you take your first step.
So I want to time everything together.
Exactly.
And then when I get to the end down here, I want to make sure that I keep the momentum going and it's just kind of a natural process to go forward, right?
Exactly.
Frequently what I see happen for me, and maybe who knows how many other different people, is that the ball almost like drops off as opposed to just flows out.
Well, one of the ways to keep from having the ball drop off is to make sure that you keep your hand behind it. One of the ways that we do it in collegiate bowling is if we need a little bit more grip, we can actually put tape in the thumb hole to make it fit a lot better. And then you want to make sure that your slide and your follow through are all happening right about the same time.
Now, we've gotten some email questions about the nature of these finger holes, and you just mentioned thumb holes. Let's talk about them. Does the placement of where the finger holes go on the ball affect the ball's movement? Or I realize like bigger hand, smaller hand, that kind of thing?
Right. The high performance bowling balls of today, where you put the finger and thumb holes can affect it a little bit in relation to how they're placed in conjunction with where that core is sitting in the bowling ball. You know, there's an asymmetrical shape to that core, and depending on where you put the finger and thumb holes, it can make the ball roll a little differently.
Okay.
But for the most part, the surface is what accounts for most of a bowling ball's performance.
Okay, and so I've got to get this bowling ball going. I want my momentum created, but that means I've got to put some force onto it, because you may remember some basic physics concepts related to force and mass. And obviously this is a 14-pound ball. If I was holding a 16-pound ball, I might need to put a little bit more force into it. If I'm holding a 10-pound ball, I might need to put a little less force into it.
In theory, you shouldn't force the ball at all.
Aha.
You should let it, basically, if you get your push away going in the direction that you want it to go down the lane, and then relax and let it swing back on its own, gravity will take it down and back. It will come to a certain point where gravity can't, or where the momentum of the ball is going to not be enough to counteract gravity, and gravity is going to pull it right back down again on that same line.
So it's just like the pendulum on the clock.
Just like the pendulum on the clock. The more we relax when we bowl, the better we throw shots.
Okay. I'll relax and let's see what happens.
Just make sure your push away is right towards where you want it to go, and then let it happen.
All right. Please note, my push away will be timed perfectly, I'm sure. Ooh. A little bit off to the left, a little bit off to the left of center, but I noticed I got an amazing amount of pin action I wasn't necessarily expecting out of that. But this gives us a chance then to talk about balls interacting with the pin anyway. I don't want to hit the head pin straight on.
You do not.
And okay.
You want to be a little off to the right for a right-hander is generally the preferred method, or a little off to the left if you're a left-hander.
And that's because you actually want the ball to hit the pins at the angle, because the pins are arranged to let that angular momentum of physics actually do its most damage, so to speak, based on the fact you hit it that way.
If we were actually to take a bowling ball and go down to the actual pins, you would see that the pins that are standing side by side are just a little less than the width of a bowling ball.
Okay.
So if you hit them straight on, the pins tend to go sideways instead of back into one another, and that's how when you hit the head pin, you leave a split. When you are off a little bit to the right side of like for a right-hander, if you're a little off to the right, so hitting the two pins literally that are still left standing on your spare shot there, what ends up happening is an ideal strike, the ball actually only hits 4 pins, and then the pins take out
the pins do all the work.
else.
They take out everything.
Exactly.
else. So if I'm going to attempt to make this fair, as I'm attempting to make the spare, then they're right next to each other, so ideally speaking, if I were just like roll this ball in between the two of them, all should be good.
All should be good.
All right, we'll hope for the best.
Although the head pin is the one that's in front, so if you're going to hit one pin or the other, the head pin, the one on this case, the one on the left is probably more important.
Okay.
Nicely done.
Woo-hoo-hoo. Notice in these two pieces of video how the ball begins to spin in a way that I notice mine does not necessarily spin. You're going to see the ball really spin. You can actually see that rotation of the spin as you see her hook begin to start. What I've noticed as I've been bowling here with you guys today is that to a large extent, my ball seems to slide for a while, like it goes straight forward. Is that pretty normal?
It depends on how you're letting go of it.
Okay.
The hook process, actually making a ball hook, is actually created at the release. And it's better to, you can create more hook the longer your fingers are in the ball after your thumb comes out. You don't actually hook a ball with your thumb in it. You hook it with the thumb out. And you have a tendency when you roll the ball to just let go of it like that. So it's basically all of the fingers and thumb are coming out of it at the same time. So you haven't actually done anything to rotate the ball. It's just coming off your hand.
So the rotation that's vital, what Krista's always getting with her rotation is the fact that she's releasing her thumb before she releases her fingers.
Correct.
And that's just something you've got to think about, practice, so that muscle memory takes over?
It's exactly about muscle memory, but if you want to think of something that would give you a similar feel, if you have a football and you just release it underhanded with a spiral, that's essentially a similar motion to creating a hook on a bowling ball.
Okay, let's go to some email questions that we've gotten. Thanks very much for this one. Does the size and strength of the bowler matter much?
Strength and size can help, but ultimately, if everybody has good timing, if somebody has good timing, you don't have to be big or strong in order to be successful. And one of our best female bowlers on the team barely weighs 100 pounds, if that.
Well, we've got some video that we can show you of multiple bowlers releasing a ball one after the other, so you get the idea that the motion is basically the same, even though the bowlers are different, and it doesn't matter in terms of their size, and you'll see it here. Different members of the Lindenwood University bowling team that were bowling the day when we came to film. The motion, the pendulum swing is there, the getting down, the knees really need to bend so that you get down. All of that's the same, but whether I'm a man or a woman, a big, a tall, a short, whatever the case may be, that doesn't affect it nearly as much as the momentum I've developed and using those physics concepts to my advantage.
Exactly.
And life is good, we're going to do that. So let's go to the next question, which is coming to us from Cheltenham, Pennsylvania. Thanks, guys, very much. Dealing with throwing a hook. Why doesn't the ball hook until the very end?
That has a lot to do with the physics of the ball going down the lane and the fact that when somebody first lets go of the ball, it's going as fast as it's ever going to go. Also, because of the way that the oil is placed on the lane, most of the oil is on the first 2/3 of the lane, generally, for most patterns. So there's less friction on the first part of the lane. There's usually no oil on the last 20 feet or so of the lane, so the ball actually gets down to the end of that oil pattern, and then it starts reading the friction and gets into a roll.
So the lack of oil creates more friction, and that's what enables the ball to hook that I've put on it.
Correct. If we didn't put the oil the certain length of the lane that we do, it would be really hard to get the ball to end up in the right spot because it would roll too early. Conversely, if the oil is placed all 60 feet, the ball may never get into a roll. It may skid the entire 60 feet.
Krista, come and join us again, because I want to ask you some questions then from the bowler's perspective as well, in terms of what you notice as you look at your ball go down the lane and you notice that kind of hook and that kind of release thing going for yourselves. So like, as you practice, as you think in terms of like wanting to always get the right hook, is it all about the fact that I'm just working on the mechanics to make sure my motion is going? Are you looking at a specific arrow on the lane, those kinds of things to help you gauge? How much are you aware? Like, do you know when you go to a bowling competition what the oil pattern is, so you know where the oil stops?
Sometimes they let us know what the oil pattern is, not always. So that's something that you have to figure out in practice and try different parts of the lane to see what's going to work best and where's the right area to play.
And are you targeting a spot, like if life was good, 50 feet, 40 feet down the lane is where I'd really like to see the hook start? Are you looking for a spot for it to start all the time?
You want to have a place that you are going to cross at the arrows, and then you want a break point further down the lane, and the break point is where the ball is going to hook up.
We've got another email question that comes in, and either one of you can answer this one. Are the lanes and alley level, or are they angled slightly down?
They're perfectly level, at least they're supposed to be. If you start getting the lane tilted one way or the other, it completely changes the dynamic of how a bowling ball goes down the lane. They actually did a study a while ago, actually within the last 5 years. They actually had some professional bowlers. They bowled on a particular oil pattern and were lined up throwing strike after strike, and then they tilted the lane to the right so that the right side of the lane was a little bit lower than the left side of the lane. It was still within tolerance, so it was still a legal lane. They didn't tell them what they were doing. I said, okay, now go out there and throw on this oil pattern, which they had been striking before. and every single shot missed the head pin to the right.
Oh, wow.
Just within that amount of tolerance, because it can vary that much. So they try to make the lanes as level as possible.
Well, and this gives us a chance to begin to start talking about Newton's first law of motion. Again, another scientific concept, a physics concept, which hopefully you remember from some of your school days, as the case may be. We've got an animation that we can bring forward that will show you the idea behind Newton's first laws of motion, which is all about inertia. An object at rest stays at rest until moved by another object. And obviously we would recommend that you don't necessarily use your foot in a bowling shoe to kick the ball. You might hurt your toe. But the ball is going to continue to roll down the lane until obviously it comes into contact with the pins. And then, of course, all sorts of things are going to happen. But since the bowling alley is level, since it's not going downhill, I assume that means that as the bowling ball progresses down the lane, across the lane, so to speak, it's actually slowing down, right?
That's exactly what's happening. It's essentially gravity doing its job.
So again, a physics concept, gravity's just doing its job, slowing it down. Inertia is a force acting on the ball. It slows down eventually until it hits the pin, and that's when we really kind of notice that something's going on.
Right.
So if there were no pins at all and you had no back end to your bowling alley,
it just kept going.
It would just keep going, but eventually inertia would cause it to stop at some point in time?
Exactly.
It would just be an awful long time before we got there.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, very cool. Let's see Krista bowl again. Krista, I'll let you get set up, and we'll talk a little bit about the ball going down the lane as this happens. Watch for the concept of inertia that we've talked about before as it goes down. Look at the hook for her ball and think in terms about how that's happening. Think about the idea of momentum as you watch her do her motion. Look at the amount of force that's going on, and think about the forces that are acting on the ball as it goes down the lane. All of these concepts as she demonstrates again. Nice, nice. I'm always happy when I get at least 7, 8 pins. That's always a good thing for me. So the ball has gone down the lane. We're going to leave that spare for a moment because we're going to come back to it. But let's begin to talk about Newton's second law of motion, which deals with velocity and acceleration. And this is like how mass and acceleration act together. So we've got our bowling balls have joined us again. And remember, depending upon the size of the object, its mass, I should say its mass, not its size, you need a bigger force to be able to move it. The poor little foot can't move that bigger ball, so you need a bigger foot to move the bigger ball. And that's what Newton is talking about when he talks about how mass and acceleration and force all work together. That if you've got the same amount of mass, then obviously you need a certain amount of acceleration. But if you increase that amount of mass, then you're going to need to increase the acceleration as well. And talk about how that plays out now in the world of bowling.
Well, most people, at least on our team, are throwing about a 15-pound ball. So when that 15-pound ball is going down the lane, it has a lot more energy stored up in it because it's got a bigger mass combined with the speed. The pins, each one of the pins weighs about 3.5 pounds. So a 15-pound bowling ball versus about 35 pounds of pins, give or take, is what we're dealing with here. So a heavier ball has a little bit better chance of knocking them all down generally, but it doesn't matter what the weight of the ball is if it's in the right spot, as long as enough energy is transferred to the pins and they mix in the right fashion, any weight ball can knock them down.
And it's that energy transfer that you're interested in, that Newton's really talking about as he talks about his laws of motion. What is the energy transfer? How fast does that energy transfer happen? And what does that cause to happen then in the balls in this instance, and the pins eventually when the ball hits the pin, as the ball moves down the lane? Let's look at 2 terms related to this that you may hopefully remember. First of all is velocity. Velocity is what's known as a vector quantity in physics. It deals with both the speed and the direction of the ball. So when you're thinking about throwing the ball, it's going to go down the lane at a certain speed, and we're going to time that out in a little bit. But velocity is not just related to the speed, it's also related to the direction. Think about it in terms of weather. They'll tell you that the winds are blowing like 10 miles per hour from the northwest. That is velocity. Speed is simply the 10 miles per hour. A second important concept that you want to be aware of is acceleration. And acceleration, of course, is the rate or change in that velocity. In fact, does the ball pick up acceleration as it goes down the lane? Well, we just talked about the idea, of course, that the lane's just flat and the ball actually slows down. So in terms of the world of bowling, there's actually a negative acceleration that's happening with the bowling ball, That's a little bit different than you probably think about it when you think about what the word acceleration just means. Most of us think about acceleration being, I'm driving my car and I want to go faster, so I push down on the gas and I accelerate and I go faster. And where this comes into play, obviously, is different objects, as we saw in the animation. Different objects are going to need different types of acceleration. Bigger ball needs a bigger foot to kick it. Same thing happens when you want to slow something down. Bigger object at movement is going to need a bigger force working against it to stop the acceleration. As you guys really work with kids to help train them to be the best bowlers they can, are you guys utilizing film, scientific principles? Are you noticing repetition and delivery? Are you noticing velocity and speed? Do you guys check for that kind of thing?
Well, we're using those concepts, but not necessarily in a straightforward scientific way. Basically, the tips that I gave you when you were asking for a little coaching advice, that's basically what we focus on. We're trying to create the best fundamentals so that as somebody grows, that they have those basic fundamentals with them. We don't want somebody to try to throw the ball. We want them to roll it. We want them to take advantage of the forces that are around them to help them get the ball down the lane without having to try so hard. Gravity being one of the most important. You know, if we start the ball up here and are putting it onto a lane that's 4 or 5 feet below us, there's some gravitational force that's automatically going to create some momentum in that swing.
All right, very cool. So there's some ideas on Newton's first 2 laws of motion. Now let's talk about Newton's 3rd law of motion, which of course the famous equal and opposite reaction concept, which hopefully we remember. Our animation will give you an idea of how the bowling pins are worried about this reaction, about what's going to happen to them. They're going to definitely have a reaction. So the bowling ball is going down the lane. The bowling ball hits the pins, and there is an equal and opposite reaction based on the force. And when we were talking about it before in terms of the action that you want, it is that angular momentum of the pins that's really what we're noticing, because if I hit the head pin straight on, they're not going to move in the way that gives me what I want for this particular sport.
And we're always trying to create, the reason that we try to actually hook a ball is to create a little bit different angle as the ball hits those key pins, the 1 and the 3, or a left-hander, the 1 and the 2.
Okay.
Just from the physics and the way the pins are set up on the lane, about a 6-degree angle going into that rack of pins is the most optimum.
Excellent. Krista, do you want to clear your spare so we can, and we'll watch your angle as you do that, and then we'll be ready to show some strikes. So Krista's going to clear her spare for us. Again, think about the concepts we've talked today and putting them together in your mind as you watch her ball go down the lane. What's its velocity look like? How fast is it? What's this hook now? She picks up the spare there over on the left-hand side of the lane. Thanks, Krista. Nice, nice, nice. Phil, we've got an email question that's come in from Linda. Linda, thanks very much for your question. She's aware that, she asks, aren't some lanes synthetic and some lanes made of wood? And does that in any way affect friction or the way the lane deals with the ball?
It definitely does. Actually, more lanes today are being made out of synthetic surfaces or like plastic compounds. The wood surface is much more porous. It tends to soak up the oil much more. It's much softer. Therefore, when a ball is sitting on a wood surface, there's actually more of that ball in contact, so therefore there's more friction generally. The synthetic surfaces tend to be smoother, they tend to be harder, so when oil is laid over the top of them, there's actually, in a microscopic way, less surface of the bowling ball touching the lane, so there's less friction.
Okay, great question. Thanks, Linda. Don't forget, everybody, you can email us your questions to live@hectv.org. That's live@hectv.org. Let's look a little bit more at Newton's 3rd law of motion, this concept of an equal and opposite reaction. The ball is hitting the pins are striking into each other. The momentum, the energy is being transferred from the ball into the pins, then obviously as they strike each other, that kinetic energy is being transferred again. We've got some video we can show you. First of all, in real-time speed, just notice what happens and what you're able to see about this pin action. So there you see it in real time. And obviously you're able to notice that there's definite movement of the pins. But let's slow it down. Let's go half speed, shall we? Let's watch it in half speed. You can begin to see a little bit more about the way the pins interact with each other, about how those pins moved in a certain direction, which actually left those two pins standing there at the beginning, and now they had to be picked up in a spare. Now let's take that same shot and let's do a frame by frame slow motion for you so you can really see the ball come in and those pins begin to move very slowly across the alley. So the ball continues to move. You notice it was hooking over there to the left, so it's actually not hitting the head pin. It moves on to hit another pin. The pins begin to react to each other. They're tilting and tipping and all of that kind of good stuff. And talk a little bit about just what you notice here about how the pins are responding, Phil.
Well, when the ball hits the pins, it's very quick and sudden, so only when you slow it down can you see exactly what's happening. If we were actually at a little bit different angle, you could actually see the ball bouncing off of each of the pins. If it hits a pin on the left side, the ball actually moves a little to the left. If it hits a pin on the right side, it actually bounces a little bit to the right. So on a perfect strike, the ball actually goes through and bounces off of 4 different pins, and you can actually see it. You know, it doesn't go straight through them. It actually goes back and forth a little bit as it's going through the pins.
Well, I guess that would make sense because it's continuing its hook, so to speak. It's continuing its momentum.
Its hook, but it's also encountering the mass of the other pins. And even though the ball is, when it encounters one pin, it's generally 5 times heavier. It's got all of that momentum, it's got all of that energy, but it's still an equal and opposite reaction. So even though the ball is much heavier, it's going to bounce a little bit in the opposite direction of what the pin is flying.
Right, and that equal and opposite reaction is the pins being released and going out in different directions. The ball, just because it's heavier weight and has more mass than the pins, continues to move forward. That's why the pins aren't able to stop it.
Correct.
If we had pins that were, I don't know, let's say 20 pounds each or whatever, and the bowling ball coming at it was like 12 pounds each, then maybe the pins wouldn't move as effectively.
Exactly. When we see that a lot in junior bowlers, when the bowlers are throwing the 6-pound balls, or like bumper bowling, they throw it a lightweight ball very slowly, and sometimes there's not enough momentum when that ball gets to the pins, and the ball never does make it off the end of the lane.
Oh, very cool. Don't forget you can send us your email questions to live@hectv.org. That's live@hectv.org. Now we want to put some of these ideas together, so if you're watching and you've got a stopwatch available to yourself, then I would request that you actually look at your stopwatch now, because we're going to do a little bit of timing here in just a moment. We're going to be interested in finding out the speed of Krista's ball and seeing if we can convert that speed into miles per hour and then plugging it into some equations that apply to some of this physics stuff we're talking about. So Krista's going to give us an example. Let's do 3 balls. We'll roll, Krista. And I'm going to hit the stopwatch as she reaches the foul line, and then I'll hit it again as she reaches, as we see the pins get hit. So feel free to do the same, and let's see what speeds we end up with. Krista, whenever you're ready, I'll just be over here waiting for you.
From the moment the ball crosses the foul line until it hits the pins, that's what we're timing.
Ooh! Not only is it a wonderful strike, and I got so caught up in the fact that you got a strike that I didn't hit the stop button fast enough. So 3.02 seconds. Thank you very much. That's 3.02 seconds for the first one. I was excited enough, at least by 1.6 of a second, because I didn't stop it until 4.8. Krista's going to get set up for a second one now. So remember the first speed, 3.02 seconds. Let's see what her consistency is. And for me, that came about 3.3 and 3.15. So obviously, Phil and I are doing a little bit of a slightly different moment where we actually hit the start button or the stop button. But that's pretty good, I think, for the two of us, that it's that close. So again, pretty close, because he said 3.02 the first time and then 3.15. Third time's a charm, Krista. Let's see what happens on the third one. And you came up, Phil, with 3.14. Stop being a little misconsistent, Krista. That's very impressive indeed. So a 3.02, a 3.14, and a 3.15. So now, let's just take a moment to pull out the trusty calculator that I have on my phone. Thank goodness for smartphones. certainly amazing things. And we're going to take those three speeds and we'll get an average. We've got a 3.02 plus a 3.14, was that it? Plus a 3.15. That equals a grand total of 9.31 seconds. We divide that by 3, and your average time is 3.1033333333333333. Now the question becomes, how can we develop that to convert it into something that's actually going to be a speed that can matter to us? So the next part of the equation is to take that ball speed and divide it by the length of the lane. Phil, I'll ask you to come back in and join me here to remind people, the length of a lane is how long from foul line to head pin?
From the foul line to the head pin is 60 feet, 6 inches. Roughly 60 feet.
We're going to let you round down to 60 feet. And if we were doing this in meters, it's about an 18-meter long lane?
I'd have to do my conversions, but that sounds about right, yes.
Okay, I like it. Okay, so we're going to go with 60 feet. So now what we need to do is try to figure out the feet per second that she's traveling. We know that it took 3.10333, and we know that we've got to divide this out. So we'll bring up the equation for you that we're going to use right now on the screen that shows you that ball speed equals length traveled divided by time. So we're going to have to take that 60 feet that she gave us and divide it by the 3.10 seconds that we just learned about. So 60 feet, I'm going to clear that out, 60 feet divided by 3.10 equals 19.3548387, if you want to be very specific, feet per second. So she's basically going at 19.4 feet per second. Now you want to convert that into miles per hour. Now we come up with the next equation so you can see that for sure. How can you take that speed and convert it to miles per hour? We're going to take that speed, that 19.35 seconds. We have to multiply it a couple times by 60. Think about why. That's correct, because 60 seconds, there are 60 seconds in a minute, and then there are 60 minutes in an hour. So I've got to multiply it by 60, I've got to multiply it by 60 again, and then logically speaking, why am I dividing it by 5280? That's right, because we're interested in miles per hour, and there are 5,280 feet in a mile. So I'm going to take my 19.35, etc. I'm going to multiply it by 60. I'm going to multiply it by 60, and ooh, by the way, that is 69,677.4194 for people doing it in their head. And then we're going to divide that by 5280 equals, oh, you're basically doing 13.2 miles per hour as you go down the lane. So think about that now in terms of driving your car. Oh my gosh, how slow am I moving in my car if I have to go 13.2 miles per hour? Everybody thinks it's really slow. But on a bowling alley, it looks really fast because it happens really fast.
Well, and the lane is only 60 feet long. One of the other things, once again, to remember, that is an average speed. So if we were to actually get a radar gun and measure the speed at the point that she lets go of the ball, and then also measure it at the point right before it hits the pins, it's going to be faster when she lets go of it than it is when it hits the pins.
Oh, very cool. That's it. Krista, would you mind giving us another demonstration so we can see all of this come together? I want to go, as you set up, we'll go to a couple of email questions. Could a pin break a ball? Could a ball break a pin?
More than likely, the ball could break the pin. Every once in a while, a ball will hit at a weird angle. It'll hit the gutter and bounce out and hit some of the machinery, and the bowling ball will chip and crack, and bowling balls have been broken and had little chunks taken out of them. Generally, after all of the wear and tear on a bowling pin, they only last like usually about a year, and the bowling pins are pretty much done. They've been beaten so badly that you can't use them anymore. They start chipping. They won't stand up straight anymore. So the pin is more likely going to be broken by the ball.
We'll move out so Krista can move in. And as Krista gets prepared, another question that we got dealt with science, using science to get a 7-10 split. So let's see if Krista ends up with a horrible split, and we'll take it from there.
Positive thinking right there. That looks pretty good.
Oh, nicely done with the strike. So sadly, we can't use your example of a 7-10 split. So let's go to the email question that we got from Caleb. The 7-10 split, if you're not familiar with it, if we go back and look at the lane down there, the 7 pin is the one entirely on the left of the lane. The 10 pin is the one entirely on the right of the lane. That's a tough, obviously a really tough split to get. Can you utilize these physics principles we're talking about to try to help yourself out? That's what Caleb wants to know.
Basically, the best way to try to attempt picking up a 7-10 split is to come up with the most kinetic and momentum and speed that you can possibly get. You want to hit one of those pins with as much force as you possibly can, because odds of sliding it from one side of the lane to the other, since those pins are sitting on the very edge of the end of the lane, it's easier and more likely to bounce a pin out of the pit. So the pin goes into the back of the pit, actually hits so hard that it has enough momentum that it bounces back out onto the deck where all the other pins are, and just happens to hit the other pin down.
So then we really want to take these ideas we've talked about, force and acceleration, and put them into play for those kinds of things.
Correct.
We want more force, we want more speed, because even if I do a lovely curve and I hit that 7 pin at a beautiful angle, it's just probably not going to go over straight across the alley.
It's very difficult, because what happens if the lane didn't have edges, if there were no gutters, that might be a little bit easier to do. But the problem is that as the ball would get towards that pin and hit it as thin as it possibly could to slide it straight sideways, it falls in the gutter before it can get there.
Oh, wow.
So
that's not a good thing. Okay. We want obviously to do as much strength as possible to make sure we can catch that. I'm getting all sorts of buzzes here on my cell phone, so thanks very much. Oh, the difference between, someone picked up the conversation a little bit late, the difference between a regular ball and a spare ball. Let's talk about that. Could you, Krista, would you want to go pick them up? Or hand us one?
Here, I'll get one.
Okay, and let
Phil
hold the other one.
Right.
So this is the regular ball. Mm-hmm. This is the spare ball. Talk us through again the difference and why they're so important.
Okay, well, as I mentioned before, the ball's reaction is 70% influenced by the surface of the ball. And this one also has one of those asymmetric cores inside of it. So the core working with the surface makes this a very aggressive ball. It's much easier to make this ball hook because the surface is very porous and coarse, so it has a lot more friction when it's rolling down the lane.
Okay.
This is made out of plastic, which is a much smoother material, so it doesn't have nearly as much friction when it's rolling over the lane, so it's much easier to make this ball go straight. And when you're only trying to hit one pin and you've got a gutter off to the right, it's better to go straight than try to hook it, because your margin of error is better with this ball than it is with this one.
Oh, so someone like me who frequently just hits it, goes straight down the lane no matter what and never gets a hook, maybe pretty good at getting a spare, but may not be as good at getting a strike because I don't get the angle.
Exactly.
And someone who's really talented and skilled like Krista, and you obviously as the coach, wants to switch balls because you're always getting that hook, and in this instance you want less of that hook. You want to be able to go straight down the lane.
And the conditions that we bowl on, the oil patterns that we bowl on, are difficult. And so at certain times of the day, it's very hard to predict where the oil is, because these balls soak up the oil as you throw them down the lane and actually take oil off that lane. So as somebody keeps bowling, the lanes actually get drier.
Very cool. Thanks for that. We've had another question come out dealing with different kinds of releases, and we noticed that you guys have a Lindenwood University member that we had talked to earlier who actually uses a two-handed release. Mm-hmm. We've got some video. We've got some video of his two-handed release, so we can show that two-handed release video now. Phil, explain why some people would utilize a two-handed release. Is there an advantage or a disadvantage to being able to get rotation on the ball with a two-handed release?
Well, I mentioned earlier that you actually hook a ball with your thumb out of it. So whether you're one-handed or two-handed, the best way to hook a ball is after the thumb comes out, and you're basically trying to create the right angle underneath the ball to create that underhanded football toss kind of release that I was talking about earlier. If you already have your thumb out of it and you're holding onto it with another hand, it gives you a lot more leverage to be able to stay underneath the ball and rotate it.
So, Krista, would you mind holding these for just a minute? And I'm going to take this ball right here. So, and your fingers as well, evidently, Phil. So if I wanted to do a two-hand release, which I've never done in my lifetime before, so how am I holding it?
Let me grab my ball.
Grab your ball. Phil's going to grab his ball, and we're going to look at this two-handed release idea.
Okay. So everybody that throws a ball two-handed is going to do it a little bit differently. Uh-huh. But the idea is that you're basically trying to cradle the ball.
Okay.
All right, so you want to be relaxed, and you're basically just kind of holding it like this, and since you can't swing like a normal swing, it's more of a rocking motion.
Okay, so my pendulum's just going in a slightly different direction. If I'm
Correct.
doing this, I'm just
Correct.
like this.
You really have to get your body out of the way if you're going to throw it two-handed.
And does it matter to me? I'm assuming I want my front hand to come off before my back hand comes off?
Correct. Officially, you cannot throw a ball with two hands. You only can let go of it with one. So every two-handed bowler as they're letting go of the ball, this other hand comes off of it, so they're essentially only rolling it with one hand when they actually let go of it.
Dare I try this? I'm going to give it a shot.
Okay.
I'm going to give it a shot. I will not use your ball, however, for fear of doing bodily harm to it. I will attempt
if you're
instead.
Gonna do this, make sure that you get sideways.
So I'm doing more like this kind of motion.
And you want to have your fingers in the finger hole.
Oh, my fingers still stay in the finger hole.
And then your thumb just kind of lays over
lays
the
out.
top.
Okay. I'm looking forward to this being absolutely terrible. Example 1. And that, my friends, is what you call a gutter ball, and we couldn't go through the program without one, so I'm glad I gave you everybody the opportunity to show that. I'm going to have to practice big time if I'm ever going to get a two-handed release going for everybody. Thank you, Krista, so much for being with us today. I really appreciate all your expertise and the examples. And Phil, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been absolutely
great. Been a pleasure.
Our thanks to everybody at Lindenwood University, the bowling team, for being a part of this project, and of course to Randy Lightfoot and the great people here at St. Charles Lanes who enabled us to do the program from here. If you haven't had a chance to go bowling lately, then do it, because it's been a lot of fun here today. And think about some of these scientific principles, these physics things we've been talking about, as you attempt to apply them on the bowling alley yourself. This program will be archived and up on our website in just about a week, so send your friends to it. We want to end with some footage today from some Lindenwood bowling team members. Bye, everybody.